Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to get started straight away and dive straight in because we have got a lot to get through today. So, welcome to Speaking Up in the Creative Industries, Embedding Standards into Practice. My name's Gemma McCall, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Culture Shift, and I am really looking forward to today's conversation. And I hope you all are too. So, for anyone who's new to Culture Shift, we're the team behind the report and support system, which is used across lots of different organisations across the UK. But from a creative organisations perspective, we work with Channel 4, the Barbican, and the National Theatre. And those organisations work with us because they want ongoing support, shared learning, and a clearer understanding of what's happening beneath the surface of their culture. If you would like to explore more about how our system works, then there's going to be a little link to book a demo shared in the chat in a second. Today, I'm really excited to be joined by two fantastic guests. Nikki Akeju is CIISA's Director of Stakeholder Engagement. She led the development, consultation and publication of the CIISA standards and has over 2 decades of experience across the creative industries, having held senior positions at the BFI, BBC, Screen Skills and BAFTA. Hi, Nikki.
Hi, good to see you, Gemma.
And Andrew Medlock is CIISA's COO, who brings more than 15 years of experience in complaints, standards, and organisational learning from his work with the Parliamentary and Health Service Ombudsman. So between them, they bring exactly the right mix of creative industry knowledge and operational expertise for the conversation that we're just about to have. Hi, Andrew.
Hello, Gemma. Hello, all. Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you for being here. So before I get into it, I just want to set the scene because this conversation, I don't need to tell you all, is landing at a very significant moment for the sector. The creative industries are one of the UK's greatest success stories, contributing £124 billion to the economy and supporting over 2 million jobs. The government's modern industrial strategy has prioritised the sector as a driver for growth, with bold ambitions to make the UK the world's #1 destination for creative investment by 2035. But that success depends on the people who power it. And the evidence tells us that too many of those people still don't feel safe, supported, or heard. And the numbers here are stark. CIISA's own research shows that 53% of people working in the creative industries don't feel confident reporting concerns. Beck2's 2025 Big Survey of over 5,500 workers found that 71% of those think behaviour that wouldn't be acceptable elsewhere is still tolerated in this sector. More than 6 in 10 have experienced or witnessed bullying or harassment. And for those already underrepresented, women, disabled workers, global majority workers, these figures are even worse. And this isn't just a wellbeing issue. CIISA's Growth Through Accountability report, which was published last year, found that workplace conflict across the creative industries costs £1.8 billion in lost productivity annually, affecting around 700,000 people. That's 1.4% of additional GVA that could be unlocked through more effective intervention. Alongside all of that, the legal landscape has shifted. The Worker Protection Act is now in force, placing a proactive duty on employers to prevent sexual harassment. And the Employee Rights Act is coming down the road. It's a lot of the things that affect this area come into force in October of this year, and it will only strengthen those obligations further, particularly around third-party harassment and reporting duties. So in response to all of this, CIISA published its cross-sector standards over a year ago now, setting out what safe, inclusive practices should look like across music, film, television and theatre. Those standards focus on 4 areas: safe working environments, inclusive working environments, open and accountable reporting mechanisms, and responsive learning culture. They're clear that everyone has a role to play, from freelancers to senior leaders, and that safety and respect are the baseline, not an aspiration. And as of last week, CIISA has published its new 3-year corporate strategy, setting out how it will build on those standards with practical services in what promises to be a really significant step forward for the industry. And we'll be touching on what that means in practice during today's session. But here's the thing that we really need to get to the core of today. Standards and legislation set the direction, but what actually changes culture is what happens inside organisations every day. The conversation, the systems, and the trust. And that's where many organisations are struggling. Speaking up is widely encouraged in policy, but in practice, people still really fear being labelled difficult, worry about losing work, and still don't trust that anything will change if they raise a concern. So that's exactly what we are here to explore today. We're going to talk about what organisations are really seeing on the ground, the barriers that get in the way of reporting, how power dynamics shape behaviour, particularly in freelance and hierarchical structures, and what practical steps organisation can take to strengthen their speak up culture and build genuine confidence in reporting. We're going to close today's session with a live Q&A, excuse me. So please, excuse me, drop any questions into the chat and then we can come to those at the end. So I want to start by setting the scene and digging beneath the surface of what's really happening. So the CIISA standards have been in place for a year. And on Thursday, as I said earlier, you publish a new 3-year corporate strategy. And as I referred to, the research really highlights the cost to the organisations and people. So from everything that you've seen and heard from the past year, particularly from the Trailblazers programme and from all your consultations, what's the honest picture of where the sector is right now when it comes to speaking up? I'll come to you first, Nee. Oh, sorry, you're on mute.
Oh, that's classic, isn't it? Thank you, Gemma. So as well as having led on the development of the standards, I've been working with a colleague on the trailblazing activity with a range of different organisations, some of whom I can see actually on our call today, which is great. So it'd be lovely to hear their insights. So what we've seen from that, from actually physically working with organisations, going through their policies, their procedures, their practices, discussing with their colleagues, etc. We're seeing that there is clearly an issue where people feel that they just want to feel assured that if they do raise a concern, it will be dealt with. And ultimately, the only way you can really prove that is in the demonstration of it. However, what you can also do is make sure that in all the communications that you're putting out, in all the variety of ways that you're putting those out, you're emphasizing how much, as an organization, how much value you put in people speaking out and how you support them in speaking out. So with the Trailblazers, we did a lot of work actually with a number of them, not only looking at those policies and procedures, because if they're just sitting on a shelf, I mean, they're not doing anything. And also what we learn is clearly often, especially in sort of in all of the creative industries, but you're a freelancer, you get a bunch of documents, it's like sign these, and then you're on the job and you're like, yeah, that's great, brilliant, done. So you've done your, the compliance bit's done, but actually it's also really important to make sure that you are verbally briefing people, having, reminders, checking in, etc. Because it's likewise, if you're commissioned, you get the contracts. It's like, yep, that's great. And you get all this other information at the same time. But it really is important to ensure that you're going back and just like emphasizing and actually, pointing things out as you go along, just to give people that reassurance and reminder that it's important. It's important to the organization. The organization is emphasizing the value of speaking out and really demonstrating that it is important to them. Mm-hmm. Does that answer that question?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, like you say, sort of policies are great, but they're a little bit conceptual when you're initially reviewing them. And if you kind of think about someone who is experiencing problems and they come to, dust that policy off, Can they find it? Is it in really plain language so that they know exactly how to access help or support, or have a conversation with someone so that they can kind of start to understand and navigate what it is that's happening to them. And that, I think, plain language policy is also really important because, like you say, it's all like tick tick tick, and everyone's kind of like, oh, nothing bad's going to happen here. And then when it does, and you add trauma, at the kind of extreme level, or just at least a lot of emotion, those things need to be really easy to navigate as well.
Definitely. And actually, I'd add to that, it's also about cross-checking policies, because different policies created at different times that refer to each other. It's really important to make sure that they all actually do align in terms of what they're saying, and just ensuring around version control is really important as well.
Yeah, 100%. Andrew, where do you think, we honestly are when it comes to speaking up right now in the sector?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. I completely agree with everything we've just been discussing there. From my observations, as with any industry, I think that there is some really good practice that exists in the creative industries. I want to get that across. And of course, there's some that is not so good. That tends to be associated with time and resources. The more that you have, in terms of time and resources to set the right approach, policies, processes, etc., and so forth, then the more chances that you're going to be successful. But for me, I think you can have all of that, but if you don't get the culture right, if you don't get the approach right, then that's where the gap is going to be, and that's what I see day in, day out, when I can see that where this is not quite landing. Simply having processes and policies and procedures doesn't mean that the work is done. And it's really got to be user-centric when you're building up that culture. What are you trying to achieve? What are you trying to address? And how does everything then flow from that? You get that right, and then everything falls into place. So I think from what I've seen, when organizations in the creative industries take that kind of initial user-centric approach, what are we trying to do? What's our culture? And how do we build things, processes, approaches around that? They're the ones that are having the most amount of success. So that's my viewpoint in terms of the honest picture of where the sector is right now. There's incredible amounts of really good practice that CIISA wants to harness and speak about and champion, but also think about how it can be flexed and tailored for each individual different shape and size of organization across creative industries, with the culture first approach front and center.
Definitely. I mean, I wonder if it's worth talking about the user-led research that we did at CIISA, which was specifically for our own reporting channel, which is coming later down the line, but it really highlighted a few things culturally within the industry. I mean, actually, a lot of people on this call will probably already know it, so it might not be worth repeating a lot, but, often we're finding that there are these whisper networks that exist within organizations, and within that freelance community as well. And that is a real challenge, and that is where it's really important for to be able to provide an actual proper forum where you can actually raise concerns properly, so that people don't have to rely on saying, oh, by the way, you shouldn't go in a room with that person alone, or you shouldn't, etc. So that's why we need to shift from that kind of whisper network culture and people feeling that's the only way to keep themselves safe, to actually feeling and knowing that they're able to go to within their organisation, have a variety of ways to raise concerns.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess those whisper networks come from, a survivor's desire to prevent these things from happening to anyone else. That's such a key reason why people choose to report anonymously, actually, that we see is not necessarily because they want someone to get fired, or they obviously want consequences, and for people, for organizations to take responsibility to protect people. But one of the biggest drivers for people speaking up anonymously is because they just want that behavior to stop and not happen to anyone else. And so it's really understandable that these whisper networks have exist to protect others. And like you say, that's a big challenge for for organizations to get over, because they have to demonstrate that they are winning back that trust that has been lost. And trust is, as we know, so hard to win, but so easy to lose in a flash. So there's going to be some big work having to be done about winning people's trust.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
I don't know if you want to bring it up now or later, but I think what you were saying there around, people just wanting to have their concern recorded. They just want people to know. We found that a lot in the work that we've been doing, and I think that's one of the real values of what CIISA will be able to do. I don't know if you wanted to speak on that at all, Andy.
Yeah, it's certainly from our research and from our consultations right now, that's what people want from CIISA. Through our user research, I think that kind of belies a little bit with regards to that culture that we've just been mentioning about whether people feel safe to not just speak up, but to see things being actually actioned and taken on their behalf. So we get a lot of people saying, well, what I want from CIISA or from a reporting mechanism right now is the ability to just record my experience in a safe, confidential space. I don't want to stick my head above the parapet, as the phrase goes. So we see that quite a lot of user demand in that space, which is really interesting. And it's a really important first step about recording that experience, making sure that there is somebody there who is taking note, can look at this from that kind of helicopter view. But I think the most important aspect of this is not just being able to record experiences and know that someone's there looking at it. People will expect to see action being taken. Now, that's being done on an individual case, and that gets us back to that kind of local speak up culture where active listening and then taking action is really, really important. But it also speaks to the ability to just know that by doing this thing, by making the emotional commitment, actually something will happen for the good, either for themselves or for the wider workforce. And that's the really important aspect of user demand that we really want to tap into, both at CIISA's level, but also in each and every organization. And the standards really do talk about that, particularly standards 3 and 4.
Yeah, definitely. And for the sort of HR colleagues who are on the call who are really trying to shift that, what are the most common barriers you're hearing from organizations about why they've necessarily been able to create that speak up culture? Because we're all saying it, we're all saying, speak up. Even when there's genuine intent from an organization, what advice do you give to really like harness that and make it happen?
Who's that directed to? Is that me, or do you want me to come in first? Oh no, let me. Yeah, absolutely.
In terms of what are people, repeat that first.
Yeah, so for the HR and operations people who are really trying to shift that culture and really trying to encourage people speak up but are still seeing barriers, what are those most common barriers that you're hearing from organizations of like maybe maybe they've launched reporting systems but they're still not getting people speaking up about things? What kind of things are you hearing?
I guess it's worth noting that CIISA itself isn't operation in that space as yet. In terms of the conversations we've had with the organizations that we've been working with, it's the first thing is really it's about being able to demonstrate change has happened. I think that's a key thing. So a big barrier is if it feels like things are going into a void and you're not hearing, first of all, did anyone receive my complaint? Secondly, is anything happening to my complaint or my concern? What is happening with that? Also, is this really in their remit or is it not in their remit? Because have they told me whether it's in their remit or not in their remit? What is the actual process that this will go through? What about the other parties involved? How does it work with all those? Being able to answer all of those questions helps people to feel more confident to raise their concerns, and then they kind of understand that. Well, first of all, the initial reaction in terms of acknowledging, asking what how they're feeling, what they would like to happen, etc. That's the first thing. But then also being able to understand what the process might be that they'll be going through is also another way of kind of getting over that barrier. So I think those are the key things that we're hearing. It's like, well, another thing actually in our industries is, well, this is a short job. I'm doing this job for 6 weeks or whatever. So unless anyone asks, which they might not, then I'm just going to head off at the end of it, keep my head down. I might go and tell my mates never to work with X or Y again. But, and that's so another way of, overcoming that barrier is giving individuals opportunities to feedback through regular check-ins. Because often you'll have if you're lucky, you might get an offboarding in a short job. But actually, it's really important to think about, first of all, making sure there's a good onboarding, but also thinking about, is there a midpoint that would be useful? And also, what are there kind of regular check-in points as well that you do? Because all of those emphasize to people that, actually, yeah, I am being proactively asked for feedback about how things are going. So sort of turning your question on its head, but basically a barrier is if nobody asks, if it's like don't ask, don't tell.
Yeah.
That's about it.
Yeah, definitely. Andrew, have you got anything to build on that?
Yeah, no, definitely. They're really good points, and there's something that's very kind of it's not specific or unique to the creative industries, but it's definitely amplified with the regards of you can have as many systems and processes and speak up lines as you want. If there is a cultural barrier behind those, then they won't be utilized, they won't be used. And our research into reporting really kind of amplified what we probably is known quite well already, which is creative industries still has that concept of, well, if you want to make it in this business, sometimes you're going to come across something quite bad, and you have to accept it and move on. We heard that quite a lot in terms of the way that the culture kind of sits and sticks with regards to that. I think that's also particularly amplified via those intersectional issues that you raised, gender, class, race, etc., and so forth. I think there is a lot there that's still to be unpicked with regards to how that prevailing culture of, this is how it is within the creative industries kind of affects people and amplifies as it goes through. I think the core one that we hear time and time again is about power imbalances and the very distinct way that manifests itself across the creative industries. For example, do certain roles in the creative industries benefit from that more what we call the invisible protection element, maybe linked to status, maybe linked to kind of commercial income, etc., and so forth? And does that mean that more junior partners or junior people working in or around those relationships feel that they lack a voice or they lack agency within that space as well? And of course, the biggest link to that is this sense of victimization. I think we discussed it already. There is that sense, well, if I do stick my head above the parapet, will I hear that classic phrase that that we hear time and time again, which is, you'll never work in this industry again if you do so. So all of and there's many more. I'm just picking out the kind of the core factors within this. It really points to this sense of the most common barriers, the cultural ones, the behavioral barriers. It's not so much about having, policies, processes, speak up lines, resources in place. It's about actually what sits beneath that is preventing people from coming forward. And again, that's one of the reasons why I think CIISA is in existence right now, because in the absence or in the melee of all of those complex cultural and behavioral issues, what was a gap, because we're now here to fill it, is that central, independent, trusted space where people can actually come for advice and support, and also to tell us what's happening, so that we can have an oversight of that through the glue that binds all this together, which is the CIISA standards.
And I would add to that, I think, that's absolutely right. And, on a more granular level, if you think about speaking up in the moment, which is a really important element as well, where you have, for example, we know that the generation coming in, very aware of rights and etc., which is great. But if they're seeing, people that have been in the industry for a long time accepting things that they really shouldn't be accepting, then they're learning, that's how it should be. And so the beauty of having, CIISA and promoting the standards, they then have a reference point to say, actually, my understanding is that industry doesn't accept that. It doesn't accept that kind of behavior. So it helps to empower them to at least be thinking, well, actually, maybe this is something where I can go and talk to someone and question it, or maybe I need to make a formal report, or maybe I actually just need to have a chat with someone and say, well, this is something I've experienced, this is something I've witnessed, but I understand from the CIISA standards that this really shouldn't be happening. And I also have seen in all our wonderful documents and briefings, so you've got some more power. You're getting that, trying to help with that power imbalance in terms of what we see with, with bullies is, bullies can only do what they do if everybody else, nobody else speaks up.
Yeah, there's a
And it's
complicity
unfair.
like
It's
in it.
unfair
Yeah.
to put that on people, but it's also the more we can empower people to go, actually, this isn't right. That's how you change culture.
Yeah, definitely. I also think some transparency around kind of what is being spoken up about and the action plan to accompany how you're going to prevent those things happening in the future. And I know that sounds quite like radical transparency, but I do think in a sector where trust is low, that's the kind of initiatives that we need, that kind of bold action that we need from organisations on the call today, because that is a true commitment to, we know this kind of stuff happened in the future. We're not going to tolerate it. This is how we're going to challenge that behaviour in the future and keep that kind of conversation going, so that you are, and follow through on those actions as well, so that you
Absolutely.
can start to win that trust back.
And that very much speaks to Standard 4, which is all about having responsive learning culture. So we talk about it's about learning not just from the types of concerns that are raised, but also the impact of those concerns on everyone involved. Every individual that's part of that concern, and then also understanding the impact of how that concern was handled as well, which is a really key one. And actually then feeding that back in appropriate forums so that everyone can learn from it.
Yeah.
And also one of the things we're hoping to do ourselves is to enable that to happen on a sort of pan-industry basis. But initially, at least for that organisation and for those individuals involved, just to actually feel that they are receiving that feedback and they are understanding what changes are being made. We often hear something happens and someone comes out with a statement, the lessons have been learnt, this won't happen again. So it's like, what lessons were learned? How was that fed back in?
Exactly.
And that's so important.
Yeah, I think I'm also going to get on my little soapbox about zero tolerance policies as well at this point, because I zero tolerance sounds like a fantastic commitment to make. But it's, as Mary Poppins said, it's a pie crust promise. It's kind of easily made and easily broken, because the fact is you're not going to have zero tolerance to absolutely every kind of behavior, because there are levels, right? There is conversations to be had, learning to be made. And so saying a blanket zero tolerance is going to let down the people who kind of see zero tolerance as someone removing someone from an organization. And so I would definitely also implore the organizations on the call today to be really careful with your language around that, and make sure that your language around that is appropriate, and so that you're not letting people down and breaking those promises, because otherwise that will continue to damage trust.
That's actually, that's a really good point in terms of managing expectations as well around what might happen in particular situations. That's a key thing that often comes up. It's about being really clear with everybody what the consequences of something might be, and also how there is a responsive learning culture, which does mean that someone who might be accused and actually might have perpetrated something should also have an opportunity wherever possible to learn. There may be other consequences as well for them. But the learning should be hopefully something that can happen for everyone.
Yeah, definitely. And my dislike of zero tolerance isn't because I'm prepared to tolerate poor behavior, by the way. It's just because it's just that managing of expectations for people. Go on, Andrew.
No, I was agreeing, but behavior is not binary, is it? I mean, there are certain behaviors, don't get me wrong, that are very binary, but definitely zero tolerance gives that kind of binary approach, inflexible binary approach that isn't going to get to the heart of why things happen more often than not.
Yeah, definitely. So, as you've mentioned a couple of times, you've worked really closely with your Trailblazer organisations this year to be putting standards into practice and really learning what works. And I wonder, without naming specific organisations, what has really surprised you from that programme, and what are the kind of practical insights that other organisations take away and start applying?
Really good questions. I mean, we're going to be putting a report out soon, which will kind of go through the whole kind of experiences and the learnings that we've had. I mean, I guess I've been really, I mean, not necessarily surprised, but really pleased that the engagement hasn't just been focused in HR. I think
Hmm.
that's been really great that engagement has really spread through the different organisations, and that they've, you know, been able to engage everyone, because in the standards we talk very much about it being something that has to have absolute accountability right at the top, but
Hmm.
also it's for every individual as well within that workforce. So it's really key that they've also really engaged with the workforce as well, in terms of feeding in to the work of looking at how they're doing things. So that's been great. It's been fantastic that you've had that insight from everyone across the organisation and accountability from the most senior people within those organisations. So that has been great. What else has surprised me? I mean, I guess it's been lovely to see how different industries can do things differently and also learn from each other as well. We've also, as part of the trailblazing activity, and also what we will be doing for organisations that register with CIISA, is creating these kind of peer learning sessions where they've been able to talk about their own experience of embedding the standards. And it's been really great where something that's happening in one industry, and someone said, oh, well, this is how we've been doing it, or others in our industry, and people go, oh, okay, that's great. I'd love to see, I'd love to learn more about that. And being able to learn from each other, I think, is really powerful and really, really valuable.
Yeah, definitely. Andrew, have you got anything more
Yeah.
to add to that at all?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I agree absolutely with everything. And of course, Nee and Amelia have been leading the Trailblazing program, and it's been an absolute fantastic success. We wanted it to be this. I dealt with it I did Trailblazing in another organization, and the core outcome of that is you can put standards in place, but what do they look like in practice, and how do you help navigate that? So it's really important to have that conversation. So. I guess for me, the observations about what surprised, and again, like was what was just said, it was less of a surprise, but more of a hope, an expectation. But just seeing organisations move from this slightly cautious kind of what is this, what is CISA,
Mm.
when we asked them to come and trailblaze with us, moving through this really collaborative, supportive program, and actually moving in very quickly as well, moving into these safe spaces where they could talk openly and candidly with CISA and within their workforce as well about what's working, what could be improved, what do they want from CISA, what are their fears, etc., and so forth, so that they actually viewed us as a trusted critical friend. Which is exactly where we want to be, by the way. Just that we're not here to impose rules and be looking over people's shoulders. We want to really help people and organizations work out some of the most knottiest issues that they come across within their work. So that was a really good thing to see, that by the end of it, there was a real sense of collaboration, and that CISA can really effectively operate in this space. So it wasn't painful. It was supportive, which was really good. And just building on what Nee's just said there about the peer learning, there was so much where CISA was acting as that kind of connector and convener, but also the emphasis that we made there about reflection and assessment. So it is about organizations self-assessing, but with CISA as a guide and helping them with that independent hat on to just think about things from a slightly different perspective. So there's less wood for trees moments, and there's
Mm.
more about kind of zooming out a little bit and thinking about what it looks like for everybody involved. And I can see from the outcomes of the Trailblazing report, which will be coming out very soon, hopefully by the end of this month and into June, about what value we can add in this space, but most importantly, that people know that they're not alone in grappling with these issues, there is a place like CIISA and other places where we can connect and make sure that there's a shared solution to shared problems.
Yeah, that's definitely what we see reflected within our community of practice as well, where when you're grappling with these, let's not get away from it, very deeply difficult issues that not only are they complex to deal with, but often, they can be upsetting to hear about and shocking to hear about. And when we've got our community of practice together, it's that kind of feel so isolated in dealing with them within your organization, and then you get a collection of organizations together and have that conversation about how to navigate these complex issues, and there's that kind of like sense of relief from people, and at the end of the sessions there's just that kind of like relief and kind of camaraderie, I guess, of like, great, we're not alone in tackling these things. We, in that sort of sense of being able to like work them out together, because they are really difficult. And if it's deep-rooted cultural issues within your organization, then that can be hard to face and hard to admit.
Definitely.
I'm really conscious that we've got some Q&A that I really want to get to from the audience.
Sure.
This time has absolutely zoomed by. One thing that I just did want to ask is, so for organizations that are really starting out from scratch, or who are really early in this journey, what is the one thing you want them to walk away from on this session and take away?
I mean, I would say it's all about scalability, and the way that we've set up the standards. We talk about organizations, productions, projects for a reason, because although the standards are the same for everyone, the way that you're able to implement them is going to be potentially different in terms of, are you able to sort of spend big on X and Y, or actually is there another way that you can do it, at least for now, but make sure you're doing the work, so that you can scale up as you move forward. I mean, even with the Trailblazers, we had some that were literally, just essentially a new entity, but whereas we had some that were really huge, but they're all doing the same thing but differently because of where they are right now. So I think that's one thing I want people to take away, is that it's not about going, whiz bang crazy and spending loads of money. That's not what we're trying. That's not what we want. We just want people to be treated well, and to be able to report their concerns to a variety of different ways, to a variety of different places, including anonymously within the entity, or via the entity that they're working with.
Yeah, definitely. What's appropriate sort of for your context kind of thing is, as long as the work is being appropriately done, then that is acceptable.
Definitely cannot emphasize that enough. It isn't about saying you have to have a million resources in place from day one, and that's where we see CIISA as well assisting the most in organizations that are starting from scratch, or don't have a huge amount of resources, but have issues and they want to tackle those issues. And on that theme, just in terms of one thing to walk away with, just to emphasize that there is so much rich insight and data which can be obtained really, really quickly and for free, or for low cost, I should say, which is just speaking to people in an open, trusted, safe space. Talk to the people who you work with, talk to your staff, to freelancers who work in or around your environment, your working environments, because you'll find that you're just sitting on a gold mine of insight. They'll be able to tell you what's working, what isn't working immediately. They'll give you themes. They'll tell you about bugbears that can easily morph into serious issues if not treated, if left unaddressed. So there are things that anyone can do straight away, which is just have that and bring up that real sense of safe, confidential, trusted engagement within the working environments that you're in. And that costs next to nothing.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And I was talking on another event the other day about the power of co-creating these processes,
Yeah.
like starting people on the journey. Because if the organization feels they've had a hand in co-creation rather than
Yeah.
this is what's being done, it will just be received so much more, land so much better.
Oh, definitely. And just very quickly on that, you could also find where you need to target and where you don't need to target. Because if people are saying to you, really focus on X and not on Y, then bingo, you know what to,
Yeah,
you know what your next
exactly. Rather
priority
than
is. So,
like
yeah.
putting in blanket training across an organization, for example, you
Definitely.
can be really targeted and save yourself money. So I
Yeah.
absolutely agree with that. We're not going to have loads of time for questions, but there is one question in the chat that I do really want your response to, which is, would you be able to comment on the issue of accountability / repercussions for harmful behaviours? Conscious the standards are designed to promote good practice, but it would be great to hear if you've got any insight at this point around perpetrators and accountability.
Wow. Okay. That's a great question, by the way. The issue of accountability repercussions, it comes up quite a lot. And we're going to be doing more, and interestingly, you're mentioning about co-creation and collaboration in this space. There's a really important kind of missing piece of the jigsaw for CIISA and also for creative industries as well, with regards to what does accountability look like. When Jen and I get asked this question all the time, we talk very, very specifically about the fact that CIISA is not here to be part of a formalized cancel culture, for example. We're not here to be in the business of getting people fired because there has been X amount of concerns that have been raised about them. That's not what we're here for. Now, if there's something serious and complex that needs to be addressed, that will be addressed. But it's looking first and foremost at what needs to be done in order to ensure that there is justice, that there is something that is ensuring that people are being held to account, that the rights and feelings of both those who are subject to those concerns and also the people who are raising those concerns are treated fairly and respectfully. And most importantly, what needs to be done to make sure that that is remedied for that individual case, but also what needs to be learned to make sure it doesn't happen again. Because time in, time out, in my experience doing this for 2 decades now, whenever you ask somebody what outcomes are you seeking, majoritively, number one is, I just don't want this to happen to other people. So when we look at that lens of accountability and kind of repercussions, we want to look at it through a learning culture mode, through restorative justice and thinking about what can we do to put things right in the here and now, but also strengthen the system to make sure it doesn't happen again. It is nipped in the bud or things are improved so that experiences improve.
Absolutely. I mean, of course, there is the law, which is the law. So if it's criminal, it's criminal. Also, it's so important that, it's not about outsourcing accountability to CIISA. The accountability remains with the hirers. It remains with the employee or the person who's doing the hiring. It ultimately needs to make sure that they are being consistent and clear in the repercussions for behaviour. You have to be really clear what it could mean for certain behaviours to happen. Because, where CIISA comes in is where people, will be where people feel that they're not seeing either a consistency or, any kind of fairness or etc. That's where we're going to be seeing that. So, but ultimately it has to start with the hiring entity. They have to take that,
Definitely.
be accountable.
Definitely. It links really nicely, Gemma, with your zero tolerance, what Nee was just mentioning there about, making sure that there is proportionate approaches to these particular aspects, making it very clear expectation-wise what isn't acceptable. But making sure it's in that prism of supporting people to understand the expectations, understand what to happen if something occurs, and making sure that people feel trusted and listened to when those concerns arise, and then taking action on them. That is the core kind of accountability pathway, I would say.
Definitely. And I guess also, as well as talking about the organisation, the other key thing is every individual is accountable for their own behaviours. and that is a real key thing about the standards. We do talk about senior leaders and organizations, we do talk about managers, but we also talk about everyone in the creative industry's workforce. There are expectations on everyone in the creative industry's workforce within the standards. So it's also not about saying it's about everyone taking responsibility for their own behaviour.
Definitely. Great. Well, that's us at time, which is absolutely zoomed past. So thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you to Nee and Andrew for answering my questions. And thanks to everyone on the call today who took the time to listen to this discussion today. We will be following up and answering any questions that you've asked in the Q&A that we didn't quite get to. And yeah, that's all that leaves me to do is just to thank you all for joining us and wish you a great day.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.